Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm delighted. I learned something last night. You and I have not talked about this. We talk all the time, but we haven't talked about this. So I decided that, one of the last things I'm going to do before leaving is make an appearance at the annual board of directors meeting at Guineith Electric. My fourth run before leaving town. And they have this committee. And this is an educational piece that I'm going to teach you about, class. Everything they ever told you is a lie. And here's more proof. So they have 9 directors, and each one of them serves for 3 years, and they're up for re-election, and they always run for re-election. Well, they have a nominating committee that nominates people to run against the incumbents. Otherwise, you'd be re-electing the people who have been elected in the first place. One guy's there over 45 years. So there's no such thing as term limits at Guineith Electric Cooperative. Well, so they formed this committee, and they have this newspaper called Cooperative News, and it comes to all the members. Those are people who buy electricity. All you have to do is pay the bill and buy electricity, and you're a member. And they say that if you buy electricity from them, you are an owner of the corporation. So I'm an owner of Guineith Electric Cooperative. But that's kind of a lie, and I'll tell you why it's a lie. Because as an owner, I asked the CEO, I sent him an email, and I asked him how much we're paying him and the top management, meaning the vice presidents of the electric cooperative, and he won't tell me. So as an owner, I have been unable to find out what the compensation package is for the CEO and the vice presidents. Well, there was an announcement in the last issue, the May 2019 issue of the Cooperative News, and by charter, they have to tell you of these meetings they have. So they have a meeting, had a meeting on the 13th, May 13th. And I learned about this, and this is a meeting of the nominations, the Committee on Nominations. Now, who are they? Well, the people who are running for re-election select people to be on a committee, to find people to run against them. So what kind of motivation would someone have to find a person to put them on a committee to get someone to run against them? Well, obviously they don't want to be unseated from office, because they get paid between $400 and $500 for half a day's work, 9 a.m. through 1 o'clock, and from 12 to 1 is lunch. So they work 3 hours, and they get a free lunch, and they get $400 minimum. If you're the chairman of the board of directors, you get $500. And then you get, travel reimbursements. And if you want to get trained on something, you get paid to go at $400 a day to do that too. So it's all, and you get free dental insurance, and you get medical insurance, and you get travel insurance. You get all kinds of perks. And the membership, the electricity buyers from the co-op have no idea that this is what's happening, that these guys are making a fortune. I mean, how many of you make $100 or $133 an hour? How many of you? Or more, $166 an hour. How many of you? Not many, right? Well, I offered to work for free, but that didn't even cut it. So they have this committee, and they had a committee meeting. So I asked the CEO, I sent him an email, and I said, I'd like to be at the meeting. He said, no, it's not open to the public. It's not open to the public. Huh. So I couldn't go to the meeting, and I wanted the phone numbers of all the committee members. He wouldn't give them to me. So he had the chairperson call me, and I talked to her last night. Now, the meeting's over. They've already selected the candidates for the board of directors. They've selected the candidates to run against the incumbents. So I had a whole bunch of questions. I talked to this gal for an hour. She was the committee chairman. I said, I'd like the phone numbers of everyone else. She doesn't know if she can give them to me, so she didn't. I said, are you being compensated? Yes. I said, how much? She won't tell me. She has to get permission from the CEO to tell me how much she's being compensated to be on the board. So on the committee. So there's a whole bunch of people on this committee to find people to run against the incumbents. So my question is, so what is the criteria that the committee looks for in selecting people to run against the incumbents on the board of directors? I hope you're sitting down. Number one, they're looking for people willing to serve on the committee. On the board of directors. They're looking for people who are willing to serve. Let me say it a different way. They're looking for people who are willing to serve. They would like them to be willing to go to some training seminars if they choose to do that. They want them to stand behind whatever decisions they make. So if the board if one of these people who is selected to run against the board members becomes a board member, and it's never happened. Well, not in my time. I've never seen it happen where one of these committee members has selected people that's run against the board who've actually won. I've never seen it myself. But the idea is if they are on the board of directors, they have to stand behind the decisions the board makes. That's very important to them. So number one, you have to be willing to be on the board. Number two, you've got to be inclined to want to go to some training if you feel like it. You have to go to most meetings. That'd be 8 out of 12 a year. That's what they'd like. They can't enforce it, but they'd like you to do that. And if the board makes a decision, you have to stand behind that decision. Here's what that means to me. That means to me that they are looking for a bunch of dummies. People who are willing to be led to slaughter or willing to lead you as a electric customer to slaughter. It's unbelievable to me. They want you to stand behind the decision. So you get a bunch of people who know nothing about running a multi-million dollar corporation. You get them in there, and then somebody says, I think we ought to raise the rates. Oh, you think that's a good idea? Well, yeah, it's a real good idea. Okay, all in favor say aye, aye. And now they've all signed an agreement saying that they will not dissent from that decision. That's how it works. Am I kidding? No. So as an owner of the corporation, I can't find out how much the CEO makes, how much the vice presidents make. As an owner, I can't go to the committee meetings. And they've already selected their candidates. And I said to this gal, how long have you been associated with the committee? Well, she's been on and off for 8 years. I said, did you know that I'm running and I'm a bona fide candidate and I have my petition signed already and have had for months? No, she didn't know. She didn't know. Obviously, she hasn't done her due diligence. Does she know who I am? Yes. And she took exception to my performance on stage because she thought I was aggressive. I said, I get 2 minutes to get my message across, and the rest of the board can talk about their honeymoons and whatever they want for as long as they want. Nonsense. They can talk about whatever they want, and it's allowed. Me, I get 2 minutes, and then the attorney and the police are ready to haul me off stage. So I asked her. So I started asking her some questions. I said, do you know smart meters are known to cause cancer? She didn't know. She didn't know that cell phones cause cancer. She didn't know about time of use metering. Here's a gal who is the chairperson of the committee to select candidates to run for the board of directors, the highest level of management of this corporation, and she didn't know that smart meters cause cancer. She also didn't know about the Internet of Everything, or the Internet of Things. During that conversation, I used the word ignorant. I said there are people who are ignorant of the facts. That doesn't mean they're stupid. It means they don't know. So here we have a whole committee of people who have no idea what they're doing, yet they're in charge. Can you imagine? That's what's wrong with the United States of America. That's why we're going down. And when I was done telling her, she said, boy, you know, it'd be great if you could get your message across. And she was glad she met me on the phone because she had a different opinion of me. Of course she did. Because she got the opinion that from top management, Finelli's out of control. We can't let him be on the board. He'll destroy the electric cooperative, which is total nonsense. I said to her, do you know that if the power grid goes down, 90% of the people will die within 30 days? She said yes. That she knew. So she knows that, and she's willing to put total incompetent, ignorant people on the board. So to be on the board of directors of a multi-million dollar corporation, all you have to do is have the willingness to serve. And it's worse than that. Because she said that, well, you know, you need to give. I said, look, one of the people that you guys put on the slate you nominated was a Walmart cashier. Now, obviously, I can be attacked for saying how insensitive that is for me to say, you know, her station in life is not commensurate with her being on the board of directors. Really? Really? So what has happened in her life that she went from, maybe she was something else, I don't know, or maybe she reached the epitome of being a Walmart cashier, I don't know. But I do know that she didn't even show up for the election. And she got no votes, or maybe a handful, maybe 3 or 4, out of thousands of people who were voting. What I'm saying is that these corporations are putting people on the board. They pay them to be on the board to be yes men and yes women. We think we need a rate increase. Okay. And then the opinion is, well, you know, we need to give people a chance. Really? So we want to have people run General Motors. Well, let's find some people who have no idea what the automobile industry is about, and let's put them in charge of General Motors, or Ford, or Chrysler, or Kraft Foods. What a great idea. Let's sink the ship. Equal opportunity for everybody. And it doesn't matter whether you know what you're doing or not. What Laclede wants is to have people who are ignorant of the facts be on the slate to run against the incumbents for the board of directors. And wouldn't it be great if you could have a board of directors who know nothing about what they're doing, and they are yes men and yes women? Wouldn't that be great? And then if you're the CEO, you can run the show because you're dealing from a position of power where the people who are above you have no idea what they're doing. So they just say, yes, whatever you think. Yep, boss, whatever you say. Rich, any comments on what I said?
Oh, you betcha. I got quite a few here. I've been writing down. Basically, this is just a micro example of no representation for the little guy, basically keeping the status quo. In other words, let me just give some examples that screw the little guy because we are allowing ourselves to be uninformed. And that's part of the distract, dumb down, and division that the powers that be are trying to implement over us to make us be followers, pardon me, and not thinkers. Now, when you look at wages and disposable income, it hasn't increased in 10 years for the middle class. So when the Fed sees a recession coming, they basically just manipulate the numbers to mask it. You know, when you look at the yield curve inversions that are occurring now, somewhere between 25 and 30 just yesterday, 80% of people live paycheck to paycheck. The middle class is literally being sabotaged. You know, we just a few examples here. Trade deficit narrowing. It usually is good news. But you got to keep in mind that our GDP or our growth is measured by consumption here in the U.S. So often that means booming exports, but manufacturing is actually going down. So U.S. consumption is weakening because of too much debt. Another great example is money printing, QE. It basically benefits the super wealthy. 93%, or let me reverse that. All of QE benefits, or the only people who benefit is the top 7%. Mostly the great majority benefits who are the top 1 to 2%. Okay, and that's basically money printing. And it's just, it's part of the Keynesian economics, but you believe you can create a better economy by changing the money supply, and that only benefits the big guy, not the little guy, because Keynesian economics is when in doubt, inflate. It's just like fractional reserve lending. Can you imagine if you as a listener could loan money to the government, to the banks, to the people, when you don't even have, and you just sit back and accept the interest and the principal coming back when you don't have the money in your bank or in your pocket or in your safe or under your mattress or wherever you keep it in order to handle the defaults and the bankruptcies that occur. And you just take in the benefits and you don't have any consequences or accountability for the bad things. Another example is Bill Clinton borrowing $2 trillion from Social Security and replacing them with IOUs. If we were to be more informed, and especially the little guy, and we would not accept the powers that be, whether it be on the micro example like Vinny's electric company, or big government or big corporate oligarchies, which have created an alliance, which Trump inherited a total fascist system. If we could stand up to this and educate ourselves, we could see how the little people show how the little people are getting screwed with the present system that we have right now. And we have to, everything is propaganda. We live in an absolute emperor has no clothes society. It's amazing the information that comes out there, just like that movie Money Monster. I talked to somebody who saw that movie with George Clooney. Everybody says it sucks. Basically, somebody came in and robbed. He's kind of got like a money show on cable news or something. And someone came in and put a gun to him, and he admitted that everything is rigged. Basically, they're just trying to make it look like Hollywood is the savior for the little guy. It's the absolute opposite. They are the actor to basically create a false narrative, Vince.
Absolutely right. Even those food shows, those cooking shows, that's rigged. Believe it or not, the cooking shows are rigged. We'll be right back. What a mess. If you heard the bottom of the hour news, you heard that Anthony's Weiner is now out of confinement. Now, who is Anthony's Weiner? Well, if you go to Wikipedia, line number 1 says, Anthony Weiner, sexting scandals. Next line, Anthony Weiner is a former member of the United States House of Representatives from New York City who's been involved in multiple sex scandals related to sexting. He is a predator who was trying to ensnare a girl, a 15-year-old girl, a U.S. Congress person, thing, critter. Can you imagine the highest level of achievement running the government corporation? We've got a guy who tried to ensnare a 15-year-old girl. Anthony's Weiner was married. His wife divorced him. And of course, he denied it. Can you imagine? Anthony's Weiner. So, if you're wondering why we're going down, class, it's just one more tiny example of the decay of America. Everywhere you look. And these Congress things, they wonder why we don't respect them? Are you kidding? How can you respect someone like that? How is it possible? Or Roy Blunt, Mr. Monsanto himself. By the way, I know one of the reasons why we've been attacked by these parasites, because they are defending Senator Roy Blunt as, a really good guy. Mr. Monsanto, taking bribes from Monsanto. Now, they're not really called bribes, are they? I think they're called political contributions. They're bribes. They're bribes. So, Roy Blunt protects Monsanto, and then, hey, there was just a $3 billion award for a victim of Roundup. Monsanto. And there's more coming. That was the third. There's just the fourth. Now the floodgates are open. And, of course, Bayer, who bought Monsanto, they're probably scratching heads wondering, why did we buy this liability? They did. Why did they do it? Well, that's the IG Farben company. So they've been poisoning people for years. Bayer, IG Farben, one, and Monsanto, it's another. It's a weapons company. They joined forces to poison the planet. And people are dying from it. And they're getting sued. And I hope they get sued out of business. That's what needs to happen. And all the principals, all the top management needs to go to prison for poisoning the planet. Rich Scheben?
Well, you kind of deviated a little bit from Anthony Weiner to Monsanto, but I'll give it my best shot. We have to remember that we talk about, when it comes to sexting 15-year-old girls, that's basically pedophilia. And we have pedophilia grooming gangs everywhere, not just in America, but all over the world. And as long as the powers that be are not going to do anything about it, we've been talking, none of us are prudes. Americans aren't prudes. We're not, we don't care what goes on behind closed doors. But why can't they use these four words that we talk about all the time? Adult, mutual, consensual sex. What's the big innovation? Why is this so hard? Adult, mutual, consensual sex. Just make those words legal and binding, and I think we can eliminate a lot of this pedophilia stuff. You got to remember too, since the 1990s, Congress has had a bimbo slush fund, which cost the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars to pay off these women. As long as we allow gold diggers and mistresses to be legal, in other words, as long as we have a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in, this is going to continue to happen. So, I basically just discussed how we can fix this whole thing in a matter of seconds. But the powers that be do not want the same rules, laws, and accountability. They want to do what they want. And when you have an addiction to power, money, and control at the highest levels, unfortunately, this is what happens. Vince?
Well, you used the word bimbo slush fund, and that's the term, bimbo that came out when William Jefferson Blythe Clinton, the guy who couldn't keep his zipper up, would prey on these women. He liked lots of women, all kinds of women. When they had a guy who was in charge of putting out the bimbo eruptions. And that's the word they use, bimbos. Well, I think the term really should be the amoral defense fund. That's more descriptive, right? Because that means that the Congressional Amoral Defense Fund, because that's what these guys are. They're amoral. They're without morals, lacking moral sense, unconcerned with the rightness or wrongness of something. That's Congress.
Well, Vince, and then you got to remember, you can't have a separate tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability, like I just said. Just like with that Behar lady on The Voice, she basically said all that Bill Clinton's people, women that he raped and stuff like that, she called them tramps. So you can't have, you say the word immoral. Being a gold digger is immoral. being a mistress is immoral. So you can't place it all on the guys when, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors in the first place.
I'm not placing it on the guys.
Rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. This is why I say I have three criteria to stand for principle. The same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second is truth. And the third is, which is very applicable here, if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what victim group status or protectionist group status they come from, then you get to do it too. See, we can't just finger Congress or finger men or finger this. Or, we have to basically put the blame where it occurs. As long as it's legal to be a gold digger, to be a mistress, as long as Democrats can do what they want, whether they may be male or female, it's not acceptable. This is why we have to follow criteria 3. If somebody gets away with it because of what group they're from, then you get to do it too. That's what we cannot have exceptions based on what group we're in. And this is what has got us into this situation in the first place. It's group identity politics. And group identity politics, along with demographics, central banks, and Keynesian economics, is what is taking us down, economically speaking. Vince?
Yeah, what I'm saying is amoral. That would apply to the mistresses. That would apply to the Congress people. That would apply to everybody. And what I'm trying to delineate is this is a fund to defend the guilty from their amorality. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and no one disagrees with that. But at the same time, look how the Democrats put porn stars like Stormy Daniels on a pedestal. This is basically an example of America being drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness. As long as we don't, the mainstream media basically protects pedophilia grooming gangs. Unless this is talked about every minute of every day on mainstream media, you can't talk about sex. We have to have, my God, there are who knows how many websites out there where college girls are looking for sugar daddies. This is why I know what you're saying, but you can't allow one group where it's okay and allow another group where it's not okay. It's a total waste of taxpayer dollars and resources when we should be fixing our debt, and we should, we're trillions of dollars in debt, for Pete's sakes. And, we have, look what happened with political correctness and the Kavanaugh effect. Now you have literal industries like Wall Street who are basically saying things like, we can't have dinners with female colleagues. Don't sit next to them in flights. Don't book hotel rooms on the same floor. Avoid one-on-one meetings. Avoid hiring women because they are unknown risks. This is the stuff that industries, even Wall Street, are saying. So if men avoid working with or traveling with women altogether, or to stop mentoring women for fear of being accused of sexual harassment, these men are going to back out of sexual harassment complaints, and it's just going to, things are going to get to the point where being accused of sexual discrimination is nothing, it's going to be almost like being accused of rape because of this political correctness. And until we have the same rules, laws, and accountability, things are just going to continue to get worse. Because you don't empower a woman when you scream wolf, damsels in distress all the time, when it just suits them, especially in the context of getting money. This is one of the reasons why Candace Owens always talks about the war on men. But when we have in America where the divorce rate is between 70 and 75%, and less than 30% of men want to get married, and Sharia law is dominating the influx into the Western world, This is a major concern, and this is why we can't be politically correct, and we have to say it like it is, and use the term adult mutual consensual sex. Vince?
Yeah. I'm going to give you some statistics when we come back about a little tiny town in Missouri. Birthplace of Senator Roy Blunt. You're not going to believe this when I tell you. Class, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. Just down the road from us is a little town called Niangua. My post office address is Niangua. I'll spell it for you so you can just look it up. Niangua. That's all you have to type. One word into your search engine. Niangua. Little town in Missouri. It's the birthplace of U.S. Senator Roy Blunt, Mr. Monsanto. The population of Niangua, Missouri is 421 people. 421. Less than 500 people. The number of registered sex offenders in Niangua is 15. 4% of the population of Niangua, Missouri are registered. 4% are registered as sex offenders. 4% of the population. There's an article in front of me that I'm just going to read you the headlines. Judge sentences Niangua, Missouri man to 1,003 years of prison. 1,003 years. You've never heard of anything like that, right? 1,000-year sentence. For what? Well, he abused his wife and his children. He brutally was found guilty of brutally beating in his wife and children with a pickaxe handle and a pipe. The exact sentence was 1,003 years. Niangua, Missouri, home of Roy Blunt. If you type in Niangua, just the word Niangua, you'll find that you'll get an image of the City Hall of Niangua. The City Hall of Niangua is one step above a falling down trailer. You think I'm kidding? I have pictures that I've taken that if I had the website up, I would show you what the town of my Niangua, Missouri is like. You wouldn't believe it. It's a blight. It looks like the absolute worst thing you could show anybody and say, I'm proud to be an American, and pull out pictures of Niangua. Now, the images on the internet are nothing like what you would really see. They show this city hall, just the corner of it. It is dilapidated. Literally, it is one step above a falling down trailer. I exaggerate not. So I guess I need to post some pictures of the life in Roy Blunt's birthplace. What I'm telling you is the United States is a mess, an absolute mess. Please look that up, Niangua. You won't believe it. So, Rich Scheben, we have people in government, people surrounding us, our neighbors, our sex offenders. And why would anybody let their children out? Why? Right down the road from us, there's a high school, and the high school teacher was fired for having sexual relations with one of her students. Prominent family name here in Missouri. So you're wondering why I want to bail out? Now you know. It's a mess. But it's not just here. There's lots of places. But this is pretty bad. Any comments, Rich?
Well, yeah, it's mostly due to political correctness, Vince. You know, we've allowed a totally separate tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability based on what victim group status somebody has. And when I say protectionist group status, that means wealth. That means power. That means big corporate America and big government employees. You know, we can't have, I mean, look at the FBI and the DOJ. I mean, look at all these phony narratives. You know, look at all these these big companies who don't even apply to antitrust laws anymore. Look at all the shadow banning and anti-First Amendment behaviors that are going on. We literally have the patriots versus the traitor globalists occurring in America today.
You're absolutely right. And class, think about this. Let's go back to Niangua for just a second. Let's say of all the sex offenders that only 25% are convicted, okay, and registered. Let's say 3/4 of them get away with it. That means that 16% of the people in Niangua would be sex offenders. Can you imagine? Everyone all set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. Off-grid Montana, as Jeff Bezos says on his website. Rich Scheben, how about the Economic 101 update? Where are we with that?
Yeah. Well, we all saw the stock market go down quite a bit, and we have to keep in mind that Trump inherited sabotage. He inherited demolition. He inherited the end of the longest economic cycle in history, where debt levels are rising faster than earned income. Now think about that sentence. So we have personal consumption or spending, which is beyond income growth, especially for the bottom 93%. We have a huge drop in savings. Debt is going through the roof. Velocity of money is non-existent, stagnation at best. Inventory levels are going up, sales volume, wage increases are non-existent. Household debt and equity prices are artificially manipulated, profits, earnings. Again, Trump inherited a fascist system. And then you throw in ridiculously high property taxes and health care, subprime loans, housing, auto, credit cards, school. Things just, let's put it this way, the economy is not as bright and rosy as certain people say they are, and I understand why Trump wants to portray that information, because he wants to change things, hopefully with the central banks with his new term. But that being said, we have to look at a lot of numbers. We got to look at math. And one of the big reasons that GDP went up last year was because of certain catastrophes like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, mudslides, fires. So the printing of money escalated and went to these places in calamity, in need of funding. Now, I want to put a couple things in perspective, especially going back to the 2008 crash. It's just like, it's analogous when they say, well, the stock market crashed because of this. It's just like at the end of every day, well, the stock market went down because of this, because of tariffs, because of that, because somebody insulted somebody who comes from a wealthy family. Of course, I'm exaggerating with a little tongue-in-cheek there, but we have to really do our reading and research to figure out what's really happening, because it's just like the Great Depression. I can read 50 different things about what started the Great Depression, and I can get 49 different answers. But basically, it's a chain reaction. It's a collapse the collapse is a process and not an event. Let's put it that way. And when you look at the Great Depression, you had silver manipulation, you had increased interest rates going into a recession, which is very common. You had a Rothschild bank going down in Austria, and decreased money supply. And that's one of the dangerous things about Keynesian economics, because Keynesian economics believes that you can create a better economy by changing the money supply. When in doubt, inflate. And for the little guy, inflation is absolutely the worst thing. Money printing, QE, all goes to the super wealthy people, and that's why we have the largest inequality ever between the super wealthy and the rest of us. So that being said, you have to look at, let's go back in time a little bit to 2008. We had $600 billion of subprime mortgage loans, which led to the crisis of the U.S., what they said. Subprime mortgage, for those of you who are new listeners who might not, I'm sure 99% of the listeners for this show knows what that means, but basically they're liar loans. It means that you don't have the qualifications to buy that house, whether it be cash flow or credit or whatever criteria they use. So, and a little sidebar, $600 billion. Some people might say, well, that's quite a bit. Well, yeah, that's one of the reasons why Trump is trying to make a deal with China, because the Chinese deficit, trade imbalance, with us and China is $400 to $500 billion in the red for us, for the U.S. Now, you got to remember, China doesn't care about copyright. They don't care about patent laws. They don't care about property rights, whether it be intellectual or any sort. They're buying up a lot of our land, our ports, our businesses. I mean, China is definitely, not to mention the fact that they've basically got Google and Apple and high-tech companies working for them against the American people. So China is a big threat to the U.S., and that's why, because of this deficit, Trump is trying to even the playing field with tariffs, which in the short run will definitely not help the little guy. But I want to talk about right now, we have a $1.7 trillion of leveraged loans in the market. Basically, this is subprime for corporate debt. It's the debt bubble, which is more than twice the size of what the powers that be said collapsed the stock market and the economy back in 2008 of $600 billion of subprime mortgage. Well, again, not to be repetitive, but I'm going to say it a different way, our corporations have more than double the debt load of leveraged loans in the market that are under subprime. So this is, and we have not collapsed yet. So we have to look at the fact that half of this corporate debt is up for refinancing over the next 4 years. That means debt is maturing. Bills come due. And I've even read that this could create a run on pension funds. Now, 2008 was not a cleansing of the economic cycle. It was a postponement of the economic cycle. You've heard the can, or the term being kicking the can down the road. That's exactly what happens. So we almost need a deflationary period to allow the bottom 93%, at least the bottom 80% to catch up. Or the powers that be are going to hyperinflate the dollar, and prosperity will only be for trust fund babies and silver spoon babies. So when you look at the overall health of the economy, you got to look at the percent of companies coming into the market now, like IPOs. They have negative earnings that are similar to the 2000 dot-com crisis. And they're changing the unit of measuring calculations and valuations. And we also have to ask ourselves, what if the debt implodes? And millions of people sell debt, corporate bonds, treasuries, especially corporate bonds, to chase hard assets. So if people sell their debt to chase hard assets because things are looking very fixed and corrupt, people are going to be buying land. They're going to be buying commodities. They're going to possibly buying equities. So this is going to send interest rates up, and people are going to keep chasing those same amount of infinite goods, which we could basically go from a deflationary, stagflationary environment to an inflationary environment. And because everything is rigged, nobody knows really what's going on. So they're talking about QE and rate hikes, rate cuts, because the whole system is so corrupt. I wouldn't doubt it if we're in a recession right now. Of course, numbers always come in as revisions down the road in arrears, which could be as late as 3 years down the road. But they have to keep QE and keep rate cuts going, because we don't even know what fair value is in a corrupt debt bubble. And let's put it this way, if rates go up, if interest rates go up, everything collapses, stocks, bonds, housing, all types of real estate, especially commercial and retail. Emerging markets, which is mostly in U.S. dollars, would be done. We couldn't even afford the interest in our debt. So I certainly believe in free markets and supply and demand, but the system is so rigged right now that I think what Donald Trump is trying to do is get through this first 4-year period that maybe he can change the system to be more fair for the little guy. But in the meantime, they're going to paper over everything, and everything will be fine. But, there's a lot of other peripheral things that we don't know about. Like, what if China sells the U.S. treasuries? When they sell a mass amount of treasuries, yields go up. So we have so many. We're basically in a war of attrition with China right now, and we got to look at a lot of things that's happening domestically. Like, we have an 8-year high of credit card delinquencies. We have no increase in velocity of money. Debt's going up, savings going down, credit's collapsing, and that's one of the reasons for the yield curve inversions that we've talked about so much on this show. And there's probably between, like I mentioned last hour, there's probably between 25 and 30 yield curve inversions that are happening right now. So economic growth looks like it's weakening. Earnings are going down. Valuations are very curious at best. And with the China tariff war, in the short run at least, it's probably not going to help the little guy. And they're talking about pegging interest rates, which is basically forcing short-term yields at low interest rates. And see, in the past, and not that we are or anybody should be a proponent of war, but typically wars occur during lousy economic periods like now. So what they do is they increase bond prices, and of course we all know that bonds are inversely proportional to interest rates or yields. So when bonds are purchased, interest rates stay low and go lower. This is why war has been profitable for the hierarchy of banks and military-industrial complexes for so many years. So I just see, despite all the rhetoric of how great the economy is, the so-called left, the so-called deep state establishment, whatever you want to call them, they can't call Donald Trump on what's happening because they use the same unit of measures and calculations to pull the wool over our eyes as well. So we have all these inflationary pressures, despite being in a deflationary, stagflationary environment. We have the government subsidies, and the corporate oligarchies picking winners. And as I've mentioned a few times, the inflationary pressures, the top inflationary pressures are healthcare, education, especially colleges, and car insurance is the top 6. And that's because of things like illegal immigrants, because they can walk into a hospital and I hear music, so I will finish that on the other half. Vince?
We'll finish when we come back. Rich Scheben, Off-Grid, Montana. Rich, please continue. You're giving us the Economic 101 update. Pretty frightening from any perspective as far as I can see.
Well, you got to look at the math. We are in an era where big government, big oligarchies, big tech, they're more concerned with manufacturing perception and swaying public opinion by holding on to the narratives. And this is why we have to do our reading and research and studying and really see where the money printing goes, the subsidies, the special interests, the lobbying, the PACs. As we enter an era of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, we have to be aware of how the powers that be are manufacturing inflation. It could be food, water, healthcare, college, insurance, lumber, taxes, stocks, bonds, rent, transportation, you name it. The little guy is losing ground. In inflation, this is why a little deflation is good for the little guy. So you can't listen to the narratives of what the powers that be are saying, because they need inflation. This normalization of inflation is a bunch of crap. The Federal Reserve is supposed to keep inflation at 0. We've gotten to the point where, anything goes, and we can't allow this printing of money and things and to go on like they are. Look at the last 20 years. There's an article on Zero Hedge I've talked about a few times. The top 6 inflationary pressures are hospital services, educational textbooks, college tuition, car insurance, medical, services, and prescription drugs. So the top 6 inflationary pressures come from healthcare, everything to do with education and college, and then car insurance is right in the middle there. Well, the reason why car insurance is in there because illegal immigrants don't have to have insurance. They can literally drive, get into an accident, kill somebody, whatever, and they don't even have to worry about a ding on their insurance because they don't legally have to have insurance. We have to pay through its cost shifting. Same thing with hospital and health care. You know, when you have tens of million people that can walk into an emergency room and drum up a charge of thousands of dollars for a few minutes of care, acute care, and they don't have to pay the bill, so we have to pay through it through cost shifting. Same thing with college. When illegal immigrants can get free college or even residential charges, the same as a state resident, who has to foot that bill? The little people do. So we have to look at what inflation is doing to the little people. And, for example, money supply has grown 20 times versus the working population, which has grown less than 1. So inflation can come in many different forms. It can come in, like food. It can come in smaller packaging. It could be, we talked about QE, like dollar, which is basically a major dollar devaluation. We can talk about our government austerity, which is basically, it creates an illusion of wealth, but what it really is a confiscation. So when we disassociate money creation from population growth to substitute a flood of manufactured liquidity for waning demand, so basically even waning demand can be a disguise also. It forces prices higher despite decelerating growth and demand. So a lot of it is a smoke and mirror situation, and printing money. When you have an economy where there's hardly any free trade or supply and demand, and you eliminate the savings and create money printing, which goes to the super wealthy, which gives an illusion of prosperity from savings and creates more debt. You can just look at math. 2% inflation devalues a $100 bill every 36 years by 2.5%. So printing lots of money, debt holders, selling treasury bonds, losing the world reserve currency, loss of fiat dollar consumer confidence, surge of money abroad coming home all at once. This is all inflationary, and it destroys the purchasing power of the little guy. Vince?
When we come back, I want to share something with you about the supply chain. It's quite frightening. You won't believe what you're going to hear. No kidding. We'll be right back. So, class, we ordered some motor oil, also known as engine oil. We ordered some synthetic, full synthetic, and we ordered some conventional, and we ordered some antifreeze last week. And AutoZone was the place where we decided to buy it. And if we buy 60 quarts or more, we get a lower price. Well, we use a lot of engine oil here, have a lot of equipment. And they were unable to complete the order without pulling inventory from other locations. I'm talking about the Finelli family. I'm not talking about a major corporation like buying a lot of engine oil and antifreeze. I'm just talking about us. I'm not blaming AutoZone at all. What I'm trying to tell you is they were unable to get all the inventory out of one store for the oil that we wanted to buy and the antifreeze. They had to pull from other stores. I'm talking about supply chain. It is really, really thin. So we also ordered, we have a tractor, an International 385. It was built in 1989, and it has 2 fuel filters. and they are spin-on can fuel filters. So we use 2 at a time. And I thought, well, if we're going to change the fuel filters every year or every 18 months or so, we ought to have some extras. So they're cheaper if you buy more. And AutoZone had the best price. These filters can cost as much as $20 a piece. So I thought we would get 10 of them. And our son placed the order. It took 3 weeks for AutoZone to pull them from the stores in this area. I'm talking about the Springfield, Missouri area. Now this is not a specialty item. This is an item that they normally stock. You should be able to walk into AutoZone and say, I'd like to buy these particular diesel fuel filters. They fit lots of applications. It's not just this tractor. It's common. Again, I'm not faulting AutoZone. What I'm saying, though, is if you want it and you think you need it, and we've got this trade tariff situation going on with China, and that most of the products come from China, including these oil filters and fuel filters, you might want to get them soon, really soon. That's what we're doing. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Actually, Vince, there are books about literally how little guy can fight inflation, and in an inflationary, whether it be manufactured inflation or any type of inflation, with supply chains being challenged and things like that, tariffs with companies like China. Until we get manufacturing, we're a semi-self-sufficient nation. We're going to be, the little guy is going to be subjected to increased prices during bouts of tariffs and things of that nature. So what these books suggest is that, let's say you go through a lot of rubber boots because you have a little farm, or you use a lot of oil like Vince does, or whatever. Buy your clothes, buy your food inventory, buy the things that you use if you have a surplus in greenbacks, especially if you feel we're going to be have inflation in some areas of the economy. But unfortunately, like I mentioned, we are in a deflationary, stagflationary period where 80% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. So it's very hard for them to do something like that. But we have to start thinking more self-sufficient. That's one of the reasons we talk about buying a little land and growing a garden, raising animals, and just learning the skill sets that we forgot from our pioneering and homesteading days. Because I personally believe the odds of Trump avoiding a recession, especially if he gets reelected, which I hope he does, is impossible with the end of an economic cycle. And when you look at John Williams from Shadowstats.com and quite a few other people, there's a lot of people saying that we are probably in a recession right now. I see the odds of Trump avoiding a recession are probably, here's an NFL analogy for you. Let's say we have a quarter and a half left of the game, and your team is down 25 points. What are the odds of that team winning the Super Bowl? Now, of course, most of you who are NFL fans, you realize I'm talking about Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and the New England Patriots coming back from 25 points down with less than a quarter and a half to play. But the odds were phenomenal. The probability against them pulling that off was astronomical. And I think Trump is seeing the same odds, and the odds of him pulling this off would be a feat of at least like the New England Patriots, how they won against the Atlanta Falcons with 25 points down with a quarter and a half to go. I just don't see, I understand why the narrative is the way it is. I understand he's trying to create a soft landing for the people, but in our present demographic situation, where the number one, well, let me put it this way, the number one growth demographic through 2050 is going to be old people in the U.S. Okay, end of the World War II generation, the baby boomers, and even Generation Xers are starting to retire, especially ones who were working for the government. So that being said, the average, or the peak spending years for the average American is between 45 and 47 years of age. Well, if the majority of the old people going into retirement has passed that, the demographic situation certainly is not going to make things better, never mind central bank, corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, which we talk about all the time, and especially group identity politics, which has eliminated hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications compared to what group you're in. So if we see numbers get better, it's only going to be because it's manufactured perception. It's changing the units of measure. It's changing the calculations. And we talk about this all the time, Vince, GDP, CPI, and inflation. Even yield curve numbers calculations have been changed. So we're in a truly an emperor has no clothes situation, and where they're avoiding savings and debt and personal consumption and credit collapsing and all the things that we talk about all the time. So I think this is a warning to the little people to start looking at relearning 19th century skills but dovetailing them with 21st century technology, and only spending something if you have the cash. Vince?
I agree. And here's a tip, class. I was concerned about this summer. I think it's going to be pretty warm. And I know that our tractors leak refrigerant. They just leak it. And it's not like we want the tractors to leak. They just do. You put 150 or 200 pounds per square inch of pressure inside some rubber hoses and some seals. It leaks out. It leaks out of cars. It leaks out of trucks. It leaks out of farm equipment. So I'm always adding refrigerant. And I thought that with this China trade deal happening, this one might be one thing that gets targeted. I don't know if it will or not, but I decided that I would buy some Freon because I cannot get in a tractor without air conditioning. It's like an oven in there when the weather is 100 degrees and you're in this tractor and it's blowing engine heat on you. It's unbearable. So I decided to buy some Freon. You can buy Freon for $7.99 a can at the auto parts store. If you decide you want to save some money, you can buy it in a 12-pack case with free delivery from Sam's Club if you choose to do that for $3.33 a can. That's exactly what I did. I decided that it's worth having that insurance, having that refrigerant here. What's the worst that can happen? I'll have to sell it to somebody else at a profit, right? So I'd rather have it than not have it, because if you think about it, would you be able to stand being in your car in bumper-to-bumper traffic this summer, going to work or coming home from work without air conditioning? Could you do it? I don't think so. So just a thought, and you can top off your air conditioning systems yourself, and there are plenty of YouTube videos on how to do it. You have to be careful. You can hurt yourself. So watch the YouTube videos. Watch a bunch of them until you make sure that you fully understand what you're doing. Wear glasses. Wear gloves so that freezing cold Freon will not freeze your fingers off if you discharge it by accident, and don't breathe it. So those are my tips for refrigeration for the class. Rich, I think that things are getting worse by the minute. I think the economy is getting worse. I think we're going into territory that's really hard to figure out. And you've asked me so many times, and I don't know the answer to this. What would I do if I had, a bunch of money? Where would I put it and park it, or use it, or invest it? Well, I certainly would not invest it in the stock market. That's a house of cards. I believe the numbers are lies. I believe the accountants lie. I believe that reported sales figures are misrepresented. I wouldn't trust the government with it. I wouldn't trust the bank with it. I would only trust myself with it. That's the only thing I would do. But if I had extra, what would you do? Would you buy new equipment? Of course not. You buy a new tractor, it's computer controlled. You can't even tune up your own tractor. Would I buy a new car? Of course not. It's computer controlled. What would I do? I don't know. I don't know. Other than land and improvements, far away from the GDP, that's where I'd go. That's where I'd go if I had extra
That's what
money.
the wealthy are doing. Yep.
We'll be right back. Rich, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Now I can. Yep, I can hear you just fine now.
I did not hear your introductory words for some reason. I got
okay.
bleeped out.
All right. Would you like to take the rest of this time? I only have one thing, but I don't need to say it.
Yeah, sure. I have so many articles here. The reason why I talked about inflation and the deflationary, stagflationary situation we're in, and how everything, even the stock markets, businesses, nobody knows what's up, what's down. Everything is manipulated. Everything's rigged. Here's an article right here. Basically says, want to make more money, work for the government. Basically, it wasn't even an implication. It gave statistics that show how the highest paid upper class is now government workers. Another article here. A day after Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez suggested the U.S. Postal Service provide banking, the day after, they reported a $2.1 billion loss in 3 months. We're living in an era, folks, where fascism has gone overboard, where the alliance of big government, big corporate oligarchies are eliminating our choices, our ability to control our destiny, to make money, to advance, because supply and demand and free markets aren't there. Everything is corruption. Everything is rigged. Everything is fixed. So this is one of the reasons why we talk about buying land and living rural. Right now, people don't want to live in this cookie-cutter, follower, politically correct subdivision mentality. If you look at where all the big money is going, it's going into buying land. That's where the super wealthy are buying land at probably 3-4 times the pace than they ever have just in the last 7-8 years, because they can see the writing on the wall. So we have to look at the high taxes and insurance costs in urban and suburban America. We got to look at states that are in the red for government pensions big time, like Illinois. New Jersey has a rain tax. They're literally taxing how much rain seeps into your soil. So if you have a big roof or concrete or asphalt, you get taxed more. And none of the money's going to where they say it's going to. So we have to think of the variety, the adventure, the freedom, the liberty, the curiosity of gaining skill sets. As soon as I'm done with this show here in a few minutes, I'm going to go out to the garden and plant my last little bit of starts that I started. I've already planted all my tomatoes, my zucchini, my cucumber, my cabbage family, beans. You name it, everything is in my garden. I can't tell you how much joy that gives me. But it also builds skill sets, because I've heard a lot of people say that, if things get tough, I'm just going to take some seeds and throw them out in the soil in my backyard and have a garden. It does not work that way, because you got to know about nutrition. You got to know about composting. Most people don't even know that nutrition comes from the soil and not from necessarily the plant. And most of our soil in America is chemically and mechanically beat to smithereens, where there's hardly any nutrition left. Same thing with harvesting edible and medicinal plants. That's a skill set. I've been doing it for years. I give tours on that. We have to look at the benefits of going back to nature. People who I meet who are into nature, it could be gardening, could be hunting and fishing, could be camping and hiking, could be living in the woods, could be raising animals. There's so many different aspects of nature, but they are the happiest, and they are also, and this is so important, folks, the less influenced by gossip, by rumor, by Facebook, by Twitter. They have the ability to not allow themselves to get manipulated, and they can think for themselves. So living in nature is truly a blessing. And I tell people when they're buying land, look for as much variety as possible. Look for ridges and draws and northern and southern slopes and edible and medicinal plants and wildlife, not just habitat, but where they can hide. Natural resources, trees, surface water, aquifers, rock, gravel, where they can tier a garden. And I hope you were informative today, folks. Vince, thanks for letting me have the last word, and I hope everybody has a nice afternoon.
Rich, thanks so much.